Karen Blake stood very still on the bridge of her ship. Her hands were locked behind her back as she watched the screens in front of her. The images coming through made her stomach turn. New Haven Colony was gone, not just damaged, not just attacked. It was completely destroyed. 300,000 people had lived there just hours ago. Now there was nothing but smoke and fire and death. The colony had been special to humanity. Families had built homes there. Children had gone to school there. People had planted gardens and opened shops and lived normal, peaceful lives. They had been far from Earth, yes, but they had been safe, or so everyone thought. Now those families were gone. Those children would never grow up. The gardens were ash. Daniel Price walked up to Karen. He was her second in command, a good man who had served with her for 5 years. His face looked pale and sick. He held a datapad in his hand, but he was gripping it so hard his knuckles were white. "We confirmed it," he said quietly. "It was the Vazroth. Their entire fleet came here." King Theron himself led the attack. They bombarded the planet from orbit for 3 hours. Nothing could have survived. Karen kept staring at the screen. The Vazroth had been a problem for years. They had fought with humans at the borders of space. Small fights, nothing major. But this was different. This was not a battle between soldiers. This was murder. Pure and simple murder of innocent people who could not fight back. "How many ships do we have nearby?" Karen asked. Her voice was very calm, but Daniel knew her well enough to hear the anger underneath. 18 ships in this sector," Daniel answered. "Another 40 can get here in about 12 hours. Earth Command is sending everything they have. They want blood for this." Amy Collins turned around from her station. She was young, only 26, and this was her first year as communications officer. She looked shocked and frightened. "Admiral, we are getting a message. It is from King Theron." Karen finally turned away from the images of destruction. "Put it on screen," she said. The screen changed. Now instead of seeing the destroyed colony, Karen was looking at the face of King Theron. He was not human. The Vazroth were insect-like, with hard shells and sharp features. Theron had 4 eyes that glowed with intelligence and cruelty. Behind him, Karen could see his throne room filled with warriors in armor. "Admiral Blake," Theron said. His voice came through the translation system, but even translated it sounded oily and pleased with itself. "I trust you have seen what we did to your little colony. Consider it a lesson. You humans keep expanding into space that belongs to the Vazroth Empire. This is what happens when you ignore our warnings." The bridge became completely silent. Karen could feel the rage coming from every person around her. She saw hands tighten into fists. She saw jaws clench. She raised one hand to signal everyone to stay quiet and calm. "Those were civilians," Karen said. Her voice was very quiet, but it cut through the silence like a knife. They were families. There were children on that planet. Theron made a clicking sound that might have been laughter. "Weakness," he said. "You humans are weak because you care about such things. It will destroy you in the end." Karen took a step closer to the screen. "King Theron, I am giving you 48 hours. The alien king tilted his head. His mandibles moved in what might have been curiosity. 48 hours for what, human?" "To pray," Karen said. Her voice was soft, but every word was clear. "To pray to whatever gods your people believe in. Because in 48 hours I'm coming for you. And when I arrive, you are going to learn something. You are going to learn why humans became the most dangerous predators on Earth before we ever left our planet. You are going to learn what happens when you kill our children." Theron made that clicking laugh again. "Threats? From a species that has lost every major battle against us for 2 years? I look forward to your attempt, Admiral. Please come. I will hang your ship next to all the others I have destroyed." The transmission ended. The screen went back to showing the destroyed colony. For a long moment, nobody on the bridge said anything. Daniel was the first to speak. "Admiral, we cannot win against their fleet in a direct fight. They have more ships than us. Their shields are better than ours. Their weapons hit harder." Karen turned to look at her crew. "Then we will not fight them directly," she said. "Get me Lieutenant Jacob Grant from Special Operations. And someone needs to find the files for Project Nightfall." Amy looked up with wide eyes. "Admiral, Project Nightfall was forbidden. The Council said it was too dangerous to ever use." Karen looked at the image of the dead colony one more time. "The Council did not just watch 300,000 of their people die," she said quietly. "Get me those files." "We have 48 hours to prepare." The bridge crew started moving, following orders, preparing for war. Karen stood at the center of it all. her mind already working through plans and possibilities. King Theron thought humans were weak. He thought their emotions made them vulnerable. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Humans could be peaceful. They could be kind and gentle. But when you hurt their families, when you killed their children, they became something else entirely. They became monsters. And monsters did not forgive. They did not forget. They came for you in the dark, and they did not stop until justice was done. King Theron had 48 hours to pray. Karen hoped to use them well, because when the time was up, she was going to show him exactly what humanity was capable of when pushed too far. She was going to show him that the worst mistake any species could make was to assume that kindness meant weakness, that mercy meant cowardice, that love for children meant vulnerability. No, Karen thought as she watched her crew prepare. Love for children meant that humans would do anything, sacrifice anything, become anything necessary to protect them. And when that protection failed, when children died, that love turned into something pure and terrible and absolutely unstoppable. The king would learn. He would pray. And then he would die knowing that he had awakened something in humanity that should have stayed sleeping. He had started a war he could not win. And Karen Blake was going to end it. The war room on Karen's ship was full of people and full of tension. Every screen showed data about the enemy, ship positions, weapon capabilities, the cold numbers that meant life and death in space combat. Karen stood in the middle of it all, looking at the holographic display that floated above the table. Jacob Grant arrived first. He was a small man, compact and muscular, with scars on his face that told stories he never talked about. He led the special operations team, the soldiers who did the jobs that nobody else could do. The jobs that were too dangerous or too secret for regular troops. He walked into the room with 7 of his team members behind him. "Admiral," Jacob said with a nod. His voice was calm and steady. Whatever Karen needed, he would do it. That was the kind of man he was. "Thank you for coming so quickly," Karen said. She touched the holographic display and the image changed. Now it showed the Vazroth flagship, a huge vessel that looked like it could crush any human ship. "We have 48 hours to do something impossible. I need your team for this." Lisa Morgan stepped forward. She was the chief science officer, a woman in her 40s who had spent her entire life studying alien biology and technology. She held a data pad and her hands were shaking slightly. "Admiral, I pulled the Project Nightfall files. They are extensive, and they are absolutely terrifying. Show me everything," Karen commanded. Lisa touched her data pad and new information appeared on all the screens. Project Nightfall was developed 5 years ago as a last resort weapon. It works because of something we learned about Vazroth biology. Their brains are connected to each other in a network. What happens to one of them can affect all the others, especially if that one is important like their king. Daniel looked confused. "Like a computer virus?" "More than that," Lisa explained. "It is a weapon that attacks their neural network directly. Once we introduce it into their system, it spreads through their mental connections. Ships lose coordination. Weapons fire randomly. Life support systems fail. We turn their greatest strength into their biggest weakness." Jacob studied the information carefully. "How do we deploy it?" "That is the problem," Lisa said. "Someone has to physically place a transmitter within 100 meters of King Theron himself. He is the center of their entire network. Infect him and it spreads to every ship in his fleet within minutes." The room became very quiet as everyone understood what that meant. "That is a suicide mission," Daniel said flatly. "Not necessarily," Jacob said slowly. His tactical mind was already working on the problem. "The Vazroth are arrogant. They think we are weak. What if we use that against them?" Karen leaned forward. "Keep talking. Theron invited you to come at him. What if we accept his invitation? Not with a fleet attack, but with something they would never expect. A surrender delegation." The suggestion hung in the air like smoke. "They would board us the moment we dropped our shields," Amy protested from her station. "Exactly," Jacob said, "which means they would bring us to their flagship." Theron would want to gloat. He would want to humiliate us in front of his people. He would bring us right to him. Daniel shook his head. "Even if we got on board, we would be outnumbered thousands to 1. They would scan us for weapons. They would find anything we tried to hide." Lisa pulled up another file. "The transmitter is biological. It is grown from human neural tissue that we modify with synthetic components. It would register as part of whoever carries it. They could not detect it without a detailed medical scan. which they will not do if they think we are defeated and broken. Karen studied the plan from every angle. Her training told her to look for flaws, to find the weak points. But the more she looked, the more she realized this might actually work. What are the casualties likely to be? Jacob was honest. The delegation team would be in extreme danger. But if it works, we save thousands of lives. Maybe millions if we can end this war completely. I will lead the delegation, Karen said quietly but firmly. Admiral. No, Daniel objected immediately. You are too valuable. Let me go instead. It has to be me, Daniel. Theron knows my name. He wants the satisfaction of seeing me surrender personally. Anyone else, and he might just execute them immediately. We need him to bring us into his throne room. We need him close, Jacob nodded slowly. I will put together a protection detail. 8 of my best people. We go in as your honor guard. The Vazroth understand military tradition. They will allow it. How long until the transmitter is ready? Karen asked Lisa. 12 hours to grow it and make sure it works properly. The surgery to implant it takes 2 hours. You will feel it, but it should not hurt. Karen looked at the countdown on the screen. 36 hours remained. Do it. Daniel, you will have command of the fleet. Position our ships for immediate attack the moment the nightfall signal activates. I want every gun ready to fire. Understood, Daniel said. His voice was tight with emotion. Admiral, permission to speak freely? Granted, come back alive. That is an order from your entire crew. Karen allowed herself a small smile. It was the first time she had smiled since seeing the destroyed colony. I will do my best, she promised. Now let us get to work. We have a king to kill. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Intelligence officers gave briefings on Vazroth ship layouts. Medical teams prepared for the surgery. Equipment was checked and double-checked. Jacob selected his team carefully. Kevin Wright, an explosives expert who could make a bomb from almost anything. Nicole Sanders, who was deadly in close combat. Henry Clark, their communications specialist. Each one was a volunteer. Each one knew they might not come back. Amy insisted on going over diplomatic protocols, even though everyone knew that diplomacy would only last as long as it took to activate the weapon. Still, they had to make it look real. They had to make Theron believe they were truly surrendering. Karen spent the time reviewing everything she could about the Vazroth. Their culture, their military traditions, their psychology. Theron was arrogant, yes, but he was also smart. One wrong move, one suspicious action, and he would kill them all before they could complete the mission. She thought about the 300,000 dead, the families that would never be whole again, the children who had died afraid and confused, not understanding why fire was falling from the sky. She thought about New Haven Colony, which had been a bright spot of hope and was now just a grave marker. And she thought about what she was about to do. It was a gamble, a huge, dangerous gamble with lives on the line, but doing nothing meant more colonies would die, more children would burn, more families would be destroyed. Sometimes the only way to stop a monster was to become one yourself, even if just for a little while. Karen looked at herself in the mirror of her quarters. In 48 hours, she would either be dead or she would have avenged New Haven. Either way, she would have done her duty. She would have protected humanity the only way she could, and if that meant walking into the enemy stronghold with a weapon in her head and death all around her, then that was what she would do. Because that was what humans did. They adapted. They survived. They protected their own at any cost. And when someone hurt their children, they made sure that someone paid the price, no matter how long it took, no matter how dangerous it was. Justice would be done. The medical bay was quiet except for the soft hum of machines. Karen lay on the surgical table while Lisa and her team worked with careful precision. The transmitter sat in a dish nearby, looking disturbingly alive. It pulsed with a faint blue light, almost like it was breathing. This is going to feel very strange, Lisa warned as she picked up the device. We are adding something new to your nervous system. You will feel it happening, but it should not cause pain. Just pressure and an odd sensation. Karen nodded and kept her eyes on the ceiling. She had led fleets into battle. She had made decisions that cost lives to save other lives. She had stared down enemy commanders and never blinked. This should be easy, but there was something deeply wrong about having alien technology merged with her own body. It felt unnatural in a way that frightened her more than combat ever had. The procedure took exactly 2 hours. When it was finished, Karen sat up slowly. She could feel the difference immediately. There was a pressure at the base of her skull, like someone was pressing their finger there gently but constantly, and there was a new awareness, a presence in her mind that had not been there before. "How do you feel?" Lisa asked. She was scanning Karen with medical instruments, checking to make sure everything was working correctly. "Like I am carrying a bomb in my head," Karen answered honestly. Lisa gave a small, sad smile. "That is actually accurate. Once you are within range of King Theron, the transmitter will automatically connect to his neural signature. Then you will need to activate it manually by thinking a specific sequence. I have loaded the trigger pattern into your neural interface. You will know it when you need it." Karen tested the interface in her mind. It was like learning a new muscle she had never known existed. The trigger sequence was there, waiting. A mental combination that would unleash destruction across the entire Vazroth fleet. 24 hours remained when they sent the message to King Theron. Amy drafted it carefully, using all her diplomatic training. The message was simple and devastating. Admiral Karen Blake, commanding officer of humanity's forward fleet, requested an audience with King Theron to discuss terms of surrender. She would come with no more than 8 attendants. She would come unarmed. She would accept whatever terms the king deemed appropriate. The response came back in less than an hour. King Theron's face appeared on the view screen again. His mandibles were clicking with pleasure. "Admiral Blake," he said. "How delightful. I confess I expected more of a fight from you humans, but I accept your surrender gladly. You will come to my flagship with no more than 8 attendants as you offered. We will discuss how your species will serve the Vazroth Empire from now on. Consider it mercy that I am allowing this at all." "Understood," Karen replied. She let her voice sound tired and defeated. "We will arrive in 18 hours. See that you do," Theron said. "And Admiral, come unarmed as promised. I would hate for there to be any unfortunate accidents before we have our talk." The transmission ended. Daniel turned from his station. "He bought it completely, of course he did," Karen said. "He is too arrogant to believe we would actually try anything. He thinks we are beaten. That is exactly what we need him to think." Jacob approached with his team. All 8 wore dress uniforms that looked ceremonial but were actually functional. Karen knew each person by name and had reviewed their files personally. Kevin Wright, who could make explosives from almost anything. Nicole Sanders, deadly in hand-to-hand combat. Henry Clark, their communications expert. The others were equally skilled. Each one had volunteered, knowing they might not survive. "Team is ready, Admiral," Jacob reported. "We have concealed what weapons we could in ways that should pass their scans. Nothing obvious enough to make them suspicious, but enough to cause problems if things go wrong." "Things will go wrong," Karen said matter-of-factly. "They always do. The question is whether we can adapt fast enough when they do." The final hours passed in preparation. More intelligence briefings, more medical checks, more equipment verification. Amy went over diplomatic protocols again and again, even though they all knew diplomacy would only last minutes at best. When the time finally came, Karen stood in the shuttle bay with her team. Daniel was there to see them off, along with what seemed like half the crew. Word had spread about what they were attempting. It was against protocol to have so many people here, but Karen allowed it. If this mission failed, many of these people would be dead soon anyway. "Let them say goodbye properly. 20 minutes to contact," the bay controller announced over the speakers. Daniel stepped forward and gave Karen a crisp military salute. She returned it with equal precision. "The fleet will be ready," he said. "The moment your signal goes out, we attack with everything. They will not know what happened until it is too late. Make sure you record everything, Daniel." Karen said quietly, "Whatever happens, humanity needs to know about this. They need to understand that we do not surrender. We adapt, we overcome, and we never forget our dead, yes, Admiral." Daniel's voice was thick with emotion. Karen turned to her team. "Mount up. We have a king to kill." The shuttle was cramped and uncomfortable. As it pulled away from the ship and accelerated toward the massive Vazroth flagship, Karen watched her vessel get smaller through the viewport. It looked tiny against the enemy ship, but she knew its weapons were charged and ready. She knew Daniel would not fail. "Entering their perimeter now," the pilot announced. "They are scanning us," everyone in the shuttle tensed. This was the first real test. If the Vazroth detected the transmitter in Karen's head, if their scans were more thorough than expected, this would end very quickly and very badly. The seconds felt like hours. Karen could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. She could feel the transmitter at the base of her skull pulsing gently. Could they detect it? Would alarms start blaring? "They are guiding us to their main hangar," the pilot said. Relief was clear in his voice. "Scan is complete." They did not find anything. Karen let herself breathe. Phase 1 was complete. The hangar was enormous, filled with Vazroth fighters and assault craft. The shuttle settled onto the deck with a gentle bump. Karen heard the outer doors seal shut behind them. They were committed now. There was no turning back. "Remember," she told her team as they prepared to leave the shuttle, "we are defeated. We are here to beg for mercy. Let them see what they expect to see, act broken and scared, and stay close to me. When this goes loud, I need you between me and them long enough to complete the mission." The ramp lowered with a hiss. Outside, a welcoming committee of 24 Vazroth warriors in full combat armor waited. Their weapons were raised but not pointed directly at the humans. Yet Karen walked down the ramp first, her team falling into formation behind her in proper military escort positions. The lead Vazroth warrior, his armor marked with command insignia that showed his rank, stepped forward. "Admiral Blake," he said through his translator. "The king awaits you. Follow me now." They moved through corridors that seemed designed to make humans feel small. Everything was scaled up, because the Vazroth were larger than most humans. The ceilings were high. The doors were wide. It made Karen's group look insignificant and weak. Perfect, Karen thought. Let them think we are nothing. Let them underestimate us completely. They walked for what felt like forever but was probably only 10 minutes. Finally, they reached a set of massive doors that could only lead to one place. The throne room. The Vazroth guards pushed the doors open and Karen saw what was inside. The chamber was vast and filled with alien nobles and warriors. Hundreds of Vazroth, all watching the humans with interest and contempt. And at the far end, seated on a throne that looked like it was carved from a single enormous crystal, sat King Theron himself. Admiral Blake, his voice boomed across the chamber. "Welcome to my ship. Come forward. Let us discuss the future of your pathetic species." Karen walked forward. Her boots echoed on the polished floor. She could feel the transmitter in her head starting to activate. The range indicator in her mind told her she was getting close. Just a little closer, just a few more steps. She stopped at the base of the throne and looked up at the alien king who had murdered 300,000 humans. Who had killed children and called it a lesson. Who thought humanity was weak. "I have a message for you," she said clearly. Her voice carried across the silent throne room. From all of humanity. Theron leaned forward on his throne. Amusement was clear in his alien features. "Then deliver your message, Admiral," Karen smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator about to strike. "We do not forgive," she said. "We do not forget. And we never, ever surrender." She triggered the mental sequence. The effect was immediate. King Theron's four eyes went wide. His mandibles started clicking frantically. Around the throne room, every Vazroth warrior suddenly staggered like they had been hit. Some fell to their knees. Others grabbed their heads. It was like watching a wave pass through the room, knocking down alien after alien. Karen could feel it through the transmitter in her head. The Vazroth consciousness was vast and complex, billions of connections all linked together. And she was destroying it. The weapon was spreading through their neural network like fire through dry grass. She could sense the cascade as it jumped from Theron to his guards to the ship's crew to the other ships in the fleet. "What have you done?" Theron roared. He tried to stand from his throne, but his legs would not support him. He made it halfway up before collapsing back down. All around the chamber, Vazroth nobles and guards were falling. Their neural systems were overloaded by the feedback weapon. "Jacob now," Karen shouted to her team. Her team moved like they had rehearsed it 1,000 times. Concealed weapons appeared from hidden pockets in their uniforms. Kevin threw small devices that stuck to the walls and started emitting electromagnetic pulses that disrupted Vazroth technology. Nicole moved to block the entrance, her body becoming a barrier between the delegation and any reinforcements. But not all the Vazroth were down. Some who were further from the king, less connected to the neural network, were recovering faster. Weapons fire started filling the throne room. Energy blasts scorched the walls and floor. "Defensive positions," Jacob yelled. He returned fire with a small weapon he had hidden in his uniform. His team formed a protective circle around Karen, their bodies creating a shield of flesh and bone. Henry activated his hidden communications gear. His fingers flew over the controls as energy blasts flew past his head. Defiant, this is ground team. Nightfall is active. I repeat, Nightfall is active. Recommend immediate assault on enemy fleet. The response came through static and the sound of weapons fire. Acknowledged. Fleet moving to attack positions now. Hold your position for 6 minutes, 6 minutes. It might as well have been 6 hours. The throne room had become a war zone. Karen's small team was fighting desperately against growing numbers of Vazroth warriors. The aliens who recovered from the initial neural shock were organizing now. Their training was overcoming the confusion, but the neural weapon was still spreading. Karen could feel it through the transmitter. It was cascading outward from the flagship to every ship in the Vazroth armada. Command networks were failing. Weapon systems were cycling randomly. Life support was stuttering. It was working exactly as designed. They just had to survive long enough for the human fleet to arrive. "Admiral, get down," Jacob yelled. He tackled Karen to the ground just as energy weapons fire tore through the space where she had been standing. A Vazroth warrior who had recovered enough to fight was charging their position. Nicole intercepted him with brutal efficiency. Her close combat training was evident in every move. The Vazroth was larger and stronger, but she was faster and more desperate. They crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs. Nicole's combat knife flashed and the warrior stopped moving. Kevin's explosives detonated in sequence around the room. Part of the wall came crashing down, creating more cover for the team. 4 minutes, he shouted over the noise. We can hold for 4 more minutes, but they were losing people. Henry took a direct hit from an energy weapon. His communications gear sparked and smoked as he fell. Another team member, a young soldier named Peter Ross, went down while covering their flank. The defensive circle was getting smaller. King Theron was slowly dragging himself toward a control panel on the wall near his throne. Despite the neural chaos, he was forcing his damaged mind to function through sheer willpower. If he reached that panel, if he managed to activate the flagship's internal defenses, they were all dead. Karen made a decision. "Jacob, cover me," she shouted. "Admiral, no," Jacob yelled back. But Karen was already moving. She sprinted across the open floor toward the king. Weapons fire tracked her movement. Energy blasts scorched the ground around her feet. But Jacob's team provided covering fire, their accuracy buying her precious seconds. She reached Theron just as his clawed hand touched the panel. Up close, she could see what the neural weapon had done to him. His eyes could not focus. His mandibles were clicking erratically. The network that had made him powerful was tearing itself apart inside his mind. "You," he hissed. He was trying to focus on her face. "You did this. You poisoned us all. You murdered 300,000 civilians," Karen replied. She pulled a small ceremonial blade from her boot. It was not much of a weapon, barely sharp enough to cut, but it would have to do. "You wanted to teach humanity a lesson about weakness. Consider this your education about strength." She drove the blade into the gap between his armor plates. The king's scream echoed through the throne room. But more than that, it echoed through the neural network itself. Every Vazroth connected to him felt his pain, his shock, his sudden fear. The effect was immediate and devastating. Warriors who had been recovering collapsed again. The organized resistance fell apart completely. The neural network, already damaged by the weapon, splintered into pieces with the death of its central node. Karen stood over the dying king, breathing hard. Through the massive windows of the throne room, she could see the human fleet arriving. Hundreds of ships, their weapons already firing. The Vazroth armada, crippled by neural chaos, could barely respond. Ships drifted without control. Weapons fired randomly or not at all. It was not a battle. It was a slaughter. Jacob reached her side. His armor was scorched black in several places, but he was still standing. "Fleet is here, Admiral. We did it. We actually did it." Karen looked down at King Theron. The alien's eyes found hers one last time. His voice was barely a whisper now. "How?" he whispered. "You were defeated. You came to surrender. How did you win?" "I gave you 48 hours to pray," Karen said coldly. Did you ask your gods for mercy? Because humanity has none left for you, not after what you did to our children." King Theron's eyes slowly dimmed. His mandibles clicked once, twice, then stopped moving. The alien king was dead, and with him, the power of the Vazroth Empire died too. Around them, the remaining Vazroth warriors were surrendering or fleeing. The throne room was filled with smoke and the smell of burnt metal and flesh. Karen's team regrouped, checking each other for injuries. 3 were dead. 2 more were badly wounded. But they had completed the mission. Communications came through on Jacob's gear. All teams, this is Commander Price. The Vazroth fleet is destroyed or retreating. We are moving to secure the flagship. Admiral Blake, please respond. Karen took the communicator. This is Blake, mission accomplished. The king is dead. The weapon worked better than we hoped. There was a pause. Then Daniel's voice came through, thick with emotion. Good job, Admiral. We are coming to get you. Just hold on a little longer. Karen sat down heavily on the steps of the throne. The adrenaline was wearing off now, leaving her exhausted. She looked at the dead king, at the fallen warriors, at her own people who had sacrificed everything. It was done. Justice had been delivered. 300,000 deaths had been avenged. But the cost was real. The team members who would never go home. The trauma that would haunt the survivors. The moral weight of what they had done. Yet as she sat there in the ruins of the Vazroth throne room, Karen knew it had been necessary. Sometimes to protect the innocent, you had to become something terrible. Sometimes to save lives, you had to take them. That was the burden of command. That was the price of justice, and she would pay it. Again and again if necessary. Because that was what humans did. They protected their own, no matter the cost. The battle lasted 17 minutes from start to finish. The Vazroth Armada, which had been the pride of their empire just hours before, was now reduced to drifting wrecks and debris fields. Some ships managed to retreat, their crews desperately trying to rebuild neural networks without their king. Most did not make it very far before their systems failed completely. Daniel led the assault from the bridge of Karen's ship. He had positioned the fleet perfectly, taking advantage of every second of confusion to maximize damage while keeping human casualties low. When the Vazroth could not coordinate their defenses, they were just targets, and the human fleet did not miss. When the flagship's throne room was finally secured by human marines, Daniel found Karen sitting on the throne steps. Her team formed a tired perimeter around her. 3 bodies lay covered nearby. 2 wounded were being treated by medics, but the mission was complete. The king was dead, Admiral, Daniel said. His voice was thick with relief and emotion. The fleet is yours to command. The Vazroth Armada is destroyed or in full retreat. We won, Karen nodded slowly. The exhaustion was hitting her now, making her limbs feel heavy. The transmitter in her head was still active, still broadcasting its destructive signal. She could feel the echo of billions of disrupted connections like static at the edge of her mind. Get medical teams to our wounded immediately, she ordered. Her voice was hoarse. And find Lisa Morgan. I need this device out of my head as soon as possible. The extraction was easier than the implantation had been. Lisa worked quickly and efficiently, though she insisted on keeping the transmitter for study. This changed everything, she said as she removed the device. The Vazroth will never recover from this. Their entire civilization was built on their neural network. Without it, without their king, they are just scattered colonies with no central authority or coordination. Good, Karen said flatly. The pressure in her head disappeared as the transmitter was removed, leaving her feeling oddly empty. Let them rebuild from nothing. Let them remember what happens when you target human families and children. In the days that followed, the full scope of the victory became clear. The Vazroth Empire, which had threatened human space for decades, effectively ceased to exist as a unified power. Their colonies fell into civil war as different factions fought for control. Their military, without central coordination from the neural network, fragmented into dozens of warlord territories. Humanity did not press their advantage. Karen made absolutely sure of that. There would be no massacre of defeated enemies, no subjugation of alien worlds, no revenge beyond what had already been taken. They had won the war and delivered justice for New Haven Colony. That was enough. The memorial service for New Haven Colony was held 3 weeks later on Earth itself. 300,000 names were read aloud, each one representing a life cut short by alien aggression. Karen stood at attention for all 12 hours of the reading. Her dress uniform was perfectly pressed. Her bearing was rigid and formal. It was the least she could do for the dead. When the last name was read, when the final moment of silence had passed, the president of Earth approached Karen. The woman looked tired and aged by the war. Admiral Blake, she said formally. Humanity owes you a debt that can never be fully repaid. You gave an entire species justice. You proved that we do not have to be the strongest to win. We just have to be the smartest and the most determined. Karen accepted the medals and commendations. She accepted the promotion and the honors. But none of it felt like enough. 300,000 people were still dead. 3 of her team had died to avenge them. Henry Clark, Peter Ross, Linda Martinez. Their names would be added to the list of heroes. But they were still gone. Jacob found her later that night standing at a window in the military headquarters overlooking the city. Earth looked peaceful from this height, though she knew the reality was more complicated. Could not sleep either, he asked. He stood beside her, both of them staring out at the lights below. I keep thinking about Theron's last words, Karen admitted. He asked how we won. He genuinely could not understand it. Because he was arrogant, Jacob said. He saw surrender where we were planning an attack. He saw weakness where we were being strategic. It is more than that, Karen said quietly. The Vazroth were too connected. Their strength was also their vulnerability. They could not imagine an enemy that would exploit it so completely. Jacob nodded. Humans are different. We are individuals first. We can work together, but we are not dependent on one collective mind. It makes us chaotic and harder to predict, but it also means you cannot defeat us by destroying one central point. Karen smiled slightly. It was a tired smile, but genuine. Humanity, she murmured, using the old saying that soldiers had adopted. It had started as a joke, but now it felt appropriate. Jacob looked at her. You gave him 48 hours to pray. Did you really expect him to use it? No, Karen admitted, but I wanted him to know it was coming. I wanted him to feel what our colonists felt in their last hours. Fear, helplessness, the absolute certainty of death approaching. And now, Jacob asked. Now we rebuild, Karen said. We honor our dead by being better than our enemies were. We won this war, but wars end eventually. Peace is much harder to maintain. That is where humanity's real strength will be tested. They stood in silence for a while, watching Earth turn slowly beneath them. Somewhere down there, families were reuniting. Children were growing up who would never know the fear of Vazroth attacks. Colonies were being founded that would never face the fate of New Haven. The price had been terrible. The cost in lives and innocence had been steep, but they had proven something vital. Humanity was not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the most advanced or the most numerous, but they were adaptable. They were cunning. They were absolutely ruthless when protecting their families, and they never forgot their dead. King Theron had learned that lesson too late. The Vazroth Empire had paid for it with their civilization, and now across the galaxy other species were taking note. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage not as conquerors but as protectors of their own. They had taken the worst the Vazroth could deliver and answered it with calculated fury. The message was clear to anyone watching. Humans could be friends. They could be allies and trading partners. They could be reasoned with and negotiated with. They could live peacefully alongside other species. But if you hurt their children, if you crossed that line, if you forced them to show their true nature, you would learn why they had become apex predators on their homeworld. You would learn that humans had not forgotten how to hunt. That beneath the civilization and diplomacy, they were still the species that had conquered an entire planet before they could even leave it. And you would learn that lesson far too late to save yourself. Karen returned to active duty the following week. She took command of a new battle group, tasked with protecting the frontier. Daniel was promoted to captain of his own ship. Jacob received every military honor that existed. The survivors of the mission were celebrated as heroes. The fallen were remembered with the highest honors. Life went on, but it went on differently now. Humanity had changed, hardened by war, but not broken by it. They had learned they could win against impossible odds. They had learned that sometimes the best strategy was also the most audacious one. They had learned that when pushed far enough, they could do anything necessary to protect their families. And across the galaxy, in 1,000 different languages, species whispered warnings to each other. Be careful with the humans. They look peaceful, but they are death world predators. They evolved as apex hunters and never forgot those instincts. They wrap themselves in civilization and diplomacy, but underneath they are still dangerous. They will negotiate. They will compromise. They will be your friends if you treat them well, but never hurt their children. Because if you do, they will not just kill you. They will dismantle your entire civilization methodically and sleep soundly afterward, knowing they did what was necessary for justice. King Theron learned that lesson. The Vazroth Empire learned it. Their fate became a warning to all who would test humanity's limits. Give them time to pray if you must attack them. They will need every second. Because when humans decide to end you, nothing in the galaxy will save you. 5 years passed after the Battle of New Haven, as historians came to call it. 5 years of peace along the human frontier. 5 years of careful diplomacy with other species who had watched what happened to the Vazroth and learned their lessons well. Karen Blake was now an admiral in charge of all frontier defense. She had more responsibility than ever before, more ships under her command, more lives depending on her decisions. But she carried it well, having learned that sometimes the hardest choices led to the best outcomes. The Vazroth remnants had eventually stabilized into smaller, independent governments. Some reached out to humanity for trade and peaceful relations. Karen approved those agreements personally, making sure that the new Vazroth leaders understood the rules. Peace was always available, but aggression would be met with overwhelming force. New colonies sprouted across human space. New Haven was rebuilt, though, with a new name. Hope Station, the colonists called it. A symbol that even after terrible loss, humanity would continue forward, would continue to grow and expand and live among the stars. Karen visited Hope Station on the 5th anniversary of the massacre. The ceremony was smaller than the one on Earth had been, but it felt more personal. These were the families of the lost, the friends who remembered, the survivors who had rebuilt their lives from ashes. A young girl approached Karen after the ceremony. She could not have been more than 8 years old, with dark hair and serious eyes. "Excuse me, Admiral Blake," the girl said politely. "My teacher said you saved us, that you made sure the bad aliens could never hurt us again." Karen knelt down to the girl's level. "What is your name?" "Sophie," the girl answered. "Sophie Grant. My daddy was on your team, Lieutenant Jacob Grant." Karen's breath caught. Jacob had retired from active service 3 years ago to spend more time with his family. She had attended his retirement ceremony personally. "Your father is a very brave man," Karen said. "One of the bravest I have ever known. He tells me stories about the mission," Sophie said, "about how you tricked the bad king and saved everyone. He says you are a hero." "Your father is the real hero," Karen replied gently. "He and all the brave people who went with me. Some of them did not come home. We remember them every day." Sophie nodded seriously. "I know, my daddy says we have to remember. That way they are never really gone." She paused, then added, "Thank you for keeping us safe, Admiral." The girl ran back to her father, who was waiting nearby. Jacob waved at Karen with a smile. She waved back, feeling the weight of responsibility and the reward of it all at once. This was why they had done it. For children like Sophie who could grow up safe. That night, Karen stood on the observation deck of her flagship, looking out at the stars. Daniel joined her there, as he often did. He was a captain now, commanding one of the newest ships in the fleet. They had remained friends through everything, bound by shared experience and mutual respect. "Hard to believe it has been 5 years," Daniel said. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday," Karen replied. "Other times it feels like a lifetime ago. Do you ever regret it? The decision to use Project Nightfall?" Karen was quiet for a long moment. Every day, she finally said, "I regret that it was necessary. I regret the lives we lost. I regret that we had to become killers to protect the innocent. But would I make the same choice again if I had to?" "Yes," without hesitation, Daniel nodded. "That is command. Living with the weight of necessary choices." They stood in comfortable silence, watching ships pass in the distance. Human ships, going about their business in peace. Cargo vessels carrying goods between colonies. Science ships exploring new systems. Colony transports full of families seeking new homes among the stars. "You know what the aliens call us now?" Daniel said. "The quiet ones. They say humans are the species that will negotiate and trade and be friendly right up until you cross the line. Then they become something else entirely." "Good," Karen said. "Let them remember. Let them pass down the story of King Theron and what happened when he attacked our children. Let it be a warning for 1,000 generations. The galaxy had indeed learned." First contact protocols now included specific provisions about respecting human colonies and civilians. Trade agreements included clauses about protecting families. Even the most aggressive species approached humanity with caution and respect. It was not fear exactly. Or rather, it was not only fear. It was understanding. Humans had proven they could be peaceful neighbors or deadly enemies. The choice was up to whoever they dealt with. Treat them fairly and they would respond with fairness, but threaten their families and face complete destruction. Somewhere in a classroom on Hope Station, a teacher was telling students about the Battle of New Haven, about Admiral Blake who had walked into enemy territory knowing she might die, about the brave team that went with her, about how humanity had faced impossible odds and won through cleverness and courage. The children listened with wide eyes, some frightened by the violence, others inspired by the heroism. But all of them learned the same lesson, that humans protected their own, that weakness shown to enemies was strength held in reserve, that mercy was a choice, not a requirement. In another part of the galaxy, in a Vazroth school, young aliens learned a different version of the same story. They learned about King Theron's arrogance, about how he had underestimated a species he thought was weak, about how that mistake had cost their empire everything. The young Vazroth were taught to respect humanity, not just their weapons or their ships, but their determination, their ability to adapt and overcome, their absolute refusal to accept defeat when their families were threatened. And so the legend grew, the story of how humanity had risen to meet an existential threat, how they had turned their enemy's strength into weakness, how they had delivered justice with precision and power. Karen Blake continued her service for another decade before finally retiring. She spent her later years writing and teaching, making sure the lessons learned were never forgotten. She wrote honestly about the moral weight of command, about the cost of victory, about the necessity of being willing to do terrible things to protect what mattered most. Future officers studied her decisions. They debated whether she had made the right choice, whether the ends justified the means, whether there might have been another way. But they all agreed on one thing. When faced with the annihilation of 300,000 innocent people, she had acted decisively and effectively. The memorial on Hope Station grew over the years. Names were added of those who died in the mission itself: Henry Clark, Peter Ross, Linda Martinez, heroes who had given everything so others could live safely. Their sacrifice was never forgotten. Humanity expanded further into the galaxy, always remembering the lessons of New Haven. They built strong defenses. They maintained powerful fleets. They negotiated from positions of strength, but they also built schools and hospitals. They promoted art and science. They proved that strength and compassion were not opposites but complementary traits. And when other species faced threats to their own civilians, humanity often stepped in to help. They had learned how terrible it was to lose innocent lives. They would not stand by and watch it happen to others if they could prevent it. The galaxy was not perfect. There were still conflicts and disagreements, still wars and struggles, but there was also cooperation and understanding. Species that had once been enemies now worked together. Trade flourished. Science advanced. Culture was shared and celebrated, and through it all, humanity maintained its reputation. The quiet ones. The species that would rather talk than fight, but when forced to fight would do so with devastating effectiveness. The people who valued peace but understood that sometimes peace had to be defended with force. Karen Blake died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 93. Her funeral was attended by representatives from 100 species. Humans mourned her as a hero. Other species honored her as someone who had taught the galaxy an important lesson about respect and consequences. Her last words, recorded in her final message to humanity, were simple and profound. Remember New Haven. Remember what we lost and what we fought for. Remember that peace is precious but must sometimes be defended. Remember that we are strongest when we protect each other. And remember to give your enemies time to pray. They will need it. And so the story of the alien king who killed a colony and the admiral who gave him 48 hours to pray became legend. It was told around campfires on colony worlds. It was taught in military academies. It was whispered as a warning in alien courts. The message endured through generations. Humanity was not to be trifled with. They were patient and peaceful by preference, but push them too far, threaten what they loved most, and they would show you why they had become the apex species on a world full of predators. They would give you time to pray, 48 hours if you were lucky, and then they would come for you with all the fury of a species that had learned long ago how to survive against impossible odds. They would come for you, and nothing in the galaxy would save you from their justice. That was the legacy of New Haven. That was the lesson King Theron learned too late. And that was the warning the galaxy carried forward into the future, a warning that helped maintain peace for generations to come. Because sometimes the best way to prevent war is to make sure everyone remembers what happens when you start one.